If you've ever worked in a place where your biggest accomplishment is surviving until 5 p.m., you'll know exactly how I felt. My name's Jason Carter, and I'm about as average as they come. I grew up in a small town in Indiana. One of those places where the biggest news is who won last Friday's football game or which store's having a sale on fertilizer. Life was simple, but somewhere along the way, simple started feeling more like stuck. By the time I hit 28, I'd managed to land a job in customer service for a manufacturing company in Dayton, Ohio. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills. Barely. My daily routine was as predictable as the sunrise. Wake up at 7, fight traffic, spend 8 hours answering phone calls from angry customers, go home, microwave dinner, and scroll through Netflix until I fell asleep. I wasn't miserable, but I wasn't exactly happy either. And honestly, I didn't think happiness was in the cards for someone like me. The people in my life didn't help much either. My coworkers, all they cared about was the next office gossip or whether Cheryl in accounting brought donuts. My boss, Mr. Hargrove, loved to remind me that I was lucky to have a job at all. And my family, let's just say they weren't exactly throwing parades for my customer service skills. The one bright spot in my life was Rachel. She worked at the local bookstore, and while we weren't exactly close, she was one of the only people who made me feel seen. Every Friday, I'd stop by her shop after work, pretending to browse the shelves while secretly hoping she'd talk to me. And she usually did. "You're back," she'd say with a smile, her green eyes sparkling as she set aside whatever novel she was reading. "Looking for anything in particular today?" "Nah," I'd mumble, trying not to sound too awkward. "Just, browsing." She'd always laugh softly, like she knew I had no clue what I was doing, and she wasn't wrong. But as much as I wanted to ask her out, I couldn't shake the voice in my head. Why would someone like Rachel want anything to do with a guy like you? That was the story of my life. Stuck in a job I didn't love, too afraid to take risks, and constantly doubting myself. If you told me back then that things were about to change, I would have laughed in your face. But then, something happened that turned my ordinary life upside down. It all started on a rainy Tuesday. I was halfway through my shift, sitting in my cubicle and pretending to care about a customer's complaint about delayed shipments, when my boss, Mr. Hargrove, walked by. He stopped, leaned against the edge of my desk, and sighed like it physically hurt him to be near me. "Jason," he said, folding his arms, "do you ever think about what you're doing with your life?" I blinked at him, unsure if it was a rhetorical question or some sort of trap. I guess so, because honestly," he continued, "you're coasting. If you want to stay in this role forever, fine. But if you have any ambition, any at all, you might want to act like it." He walked off before I could even respond, leaving me sitting there, phone still pressed to my ear. The customer was yelling about something, but I wasn't listening anymore. His words stuck with me. Coasting. Sure, Hargrove was a jerk, but maybe he wasn't wrong. I'd spent years telling myself I'd figure things out eventually, but eventually never came. I had no clue what I wanted to do, no plan, no spark. Later that evening, I stopped by the bookstore like I always did. Rachel was behind the counter, and even though I was in a funk, her smile made the world feel a little less heavy. "Tough day?" she asked as I dropped a paperback onto the counter. "You could say that." She gave me a knowing look. "You ever think about doing something different?" I laughed, though it came out more bitter than I intended. "All the time. But, bills don't pay themselves." Rachel hesitated, then slid the book across to me. "You should check this out," she said, tapping the cover. It was a self-help book, something about finding your purpose. Normally, I'd roll my eyes at that kind of thing, but something about the way she said it made me pause. "What's the worst that could happen, right?" I joked, sliding my card across to pay. "Exactly," she said with a wink. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, flipping through the book. It was filled with advice about taking risks, getting out of your comfort zone, and finding what really matters to you. Cheesy, sure, But a line in the introduction hit me like a ton of bricks. The only difference between those who succeed and those who don't is the courage to try. I stared at the page, my mind racing. Maybe Rachel was onto something. Maybe Hargrove was too. It was time to stop coasting. For the first time in years, I couldn't sleep. That line from the book, the courage to try, kept looping in my head. What did I even want to try? My life had been so routine for so long that I didn't know where to start. But then I remembered something. When I was younger, I loved fixing things. Not cars or appliances, but problems, systems that didn't work the way they were supposed to. I'd built this old computer in high school from spare parts and taught myself to code simple programs. It was nerdy, sure, but I was good at it. Over the years, I'd stopped doing any of that. Life got busy, and hobbies didn't pay the rent. But the idea of getting back to it lit a spark in me. What if I could turn that into something real? The next morning, I woke up determined. Before heading to work, I made a list of small tech problems I'd seen businesses deal with. Messy spreadsheets, glitchy websites, outdated tools, and started brainstorming solutions. By lunchtime, my enthusiasm had run into a brick wall named Mr. Hargrove. "Jason, we're here to work, not daydream," he snapped, catching me sketching ideas on a notepad. "If I catch you slacking again, you'll regret it." The words stung, but instead of backing down, they fueled me. I realized something then. Hargrove had been right about one thing: I was coasting. And if I wanted things to change, I had to stop being afraid of failure. That evening, I went straight to Rachel's bookstore. She was shelving new arrivals, humming along to the soft music playing overhead. And when she saw me, her face lit up. "You're back. Let me guess. More self-help." "Not exactly," I said, holding up the list of ideas I jotted down. "I think I want to start something." She tilted her head, curious. "Like a business?" "Yeah, maybe," I said, suddenly feeling a little self-conscious. "I know it sounds crazy, but it doesn't sound crazy at all," she interrupted. "What's the plan?" Her belief in me was almost unnerving. I barely had the courage to believe in myself, but she acted like this was already a done deal. "I'm not sure yet," I admitted. "I just know I want to help small businesses with tech stuff, streamlining their systems, fixing websites, that kind of thing. But I don't even know where to start." Rachel grinned. "Well, you're off to a good one. Let me show you something." She walked over to the community bulletin board near the back of the store and pointed to a flyer. It was an ad for a local startup workshop, promising to teach the basics of business planning. "This could be perfect for you," she said. "You should go." I hesitated. "I don't know, Rachel. That's not really my scene." Her expression softened. "Jason, you don't have to know everything right away. You just have to start. You've got the courage. Now you just need to act on it." Her words stuck with me. The next day, I signed up for the workshop. Walking into that workshop felt like stepping into another world. It was held in the community room of a sleek co-working space downtown, the kind of place where the coffee was free and the furniture looked straight out of a catalog. Everyone there seemed so polished, young professionals with perfect smiles and business cards they handed out like candy. I, on the other hand, showed up in my wrinkled button-down, clutching a notebook I'd found in the back of my closet. "Welcome, everyone." The workshop leader, a guy named Marcus, stood at the front of the room with the confidence of someone who'd clearly done this 100 times. "Tonight, we're going to talk about turning your ideas into actionable plans. But first, let's go around the room and introduce ourselves. Tell us your name, what you do, and why you're here." Great. Public speaking. My favorite. As the introductions made their way around the circle, I listened to people talk about their startups, side hustles, and impressive-sounding goals. A marketing consultant here. A real estate investor there. The guy next to me had already raised $10,000 on Kickstarter for his organic dog treat company. When it was my turn, my throat felt dry. Hey," I mumbled, clutching my notebook. "I'm Jason. I work in customer service, but I'm trying to start a small business, helping other businesses with tech stuff like websites and organization." I braced for polite smiles, maybe even a few pitying glances, but Marcus nodded enthusiastically. "Great, Jason. Sounds like there's a real need for that. Welcome. As the workshop went on, something shifted. Marcus broke everything down into simple, manageable steps. Identifying your audience, defining your unique value, creating a plan. It wasn't easy, but for the first time, starting a business didn't feel impossible. By the end of the night, my notebook was filled with scribbled notes and half-formed ideas. But more importantly, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, hope. On the way out, Marcus stopped me near the door. "Hey, Jason," he said. "I like your idea. If you want, I can introduce you to a few small business owners who might need your help. Get you some practice." I was stunned. "Really? That'd be amazing." He grinned. "Just remember, it's all about building relationships. Do good work, and the rest will follow." The next morning, I couldn't stop thinking about the workshop. For the first time in forever, I felt like I was moving toward something real. Of course, when I walked into the office, Mr. Hargrove was there to kill the vibe. "You're late, Carter," he barked as I sat down. "I'm 2 minutes early," I said, surprising even myself with how bold I sounded. He just glared at me, but for once I didn't care. Because for the first time, I wasn't just coasting, I was climbing. After the workshop, things started moving faster than I expected. True to his word, Marcus connected me with a couple of small business owners who were willing to let me help them with their tech problems. I was nervous, scratch that, terrified, but I didn't want to waste the opportunity. The first client was a bakery run by a woman named Linda. She had amazing cakes and a website that looked like it hadn't been updated since 2005. When I showed up for our first meeting, she looked skeptical, probably because I was just some guy in a secondhand blazer who clearly didn't have much experience. But I'd prepared like my life depended on it. I'd mocked up a cleaner version of her website, complete with an online ordering system she could actually use. By the time I finished walking her through it, her skepticism had turned into a smile. "This is amazing," she said. "How much do I owe you?" I froze. I hadn't even thought about what to charge. You don't. I mean, this one's on the house. I'm just getting started. So I'd love a testimonial if you're happy with it." Linda beamed. "Deal. And trust me, Jason, people are going to want what you're offering." I walked out of that bakery feeling like I just won the lottery. For the first time, it felt like I wasn't just dreaming, I was doing. But the real turning point came a week later. Linda had passed my name to her friend who owned a boutique clothing shop. That friend passed my name to someone else. Suddenly, I had 3 clients in the pipeline, all asking for help with websites, scheduling systems, and email templates. Each night after work, I'd come home, fire up my laptop, and dive into projects. It was exhausting, but it was also exhilarating. The only person who wasn't thrilled about my side hustle was Mr. Hargrove. "You've been distracted lately?" he said one morning as he loomed over my desk. If I didn't know better, I'd say your focus is elsewhere. I forced a smile. "I'm still meeting all my deadlines." "Barely," he shot back. "Keep it up, and you won't have a job to fall back on." I bit my tongue and nodded, but inside, I was seething. For years, I'd let this guy walk all over me, convincing myself I needed this job to survive. But now, I had something better to work toward. That night, as I packed up my laptop after finishing another project, I thought about Rachel. I hadn't told her much about what I was doing, partly because I didn't want to jinx it. But if anyone deserved to know, it was her. The next morning, I stopped by the bookstore. She was behind the counter, reading as usual, and her face lit up when she saw me. "Jason, you look different. What's going on?" I hesitated, then smiled. "I think I'm starting something big." Rachel was the first person I'd told about my new side hustle, and her reaction was better than I could have hoped for. "That's amazing," she said, setting her book aside. "How's it going so far?" I shrugged, trying to play it cool. "Not bad. A couple of clients here and there. It's still small, but it feels real, you know?" She grinned. "Jason Carter, entrepreneur. I like the sound of that." Her confidence in me was contagious. Over the next few weeks, my little side business grew faster than I ever expected. Word of mouth spread like wildfire. One day, I'd be helping a florist organize her inventory system. The next, I was setting up an online calendar for a local gym. Each project was a new challenge, but it felt good to solve problems and see the results almost immediately. I learned as I went, spending my lunch breaks watching YouTube tutorials on coding tricks and better website design. It was like all the years I'd spent coasting had finally been replaced by something that mattered. But balancing my day job with this new business was starting to take a toll. By the time I got home each night, I was too tired to do much of anything else. I was barely sleeping, and my weekends disappeared into a blur of projects and client meetings. The stress hit its peak one Friday afternoon when Mr. Hargrove called me into his office. "Jason, we need to talk," he said, gesturing for me to sit. I braced myself, knowing where this was going. "I've noticed a pattern," he continued, leaning back in his chair. "You're still getting your work done, but it's clear your mind is elsewhere. That's not how we do things here. This company needs people who are 100% committed." His words were like nails on a chalkboard. For years, I'd bent over backward to meet his expectations, always feeling like it wasn't enough. But now, for the first time, I wasn't afraid. "Mr. Hargrove," I said, meeting his gaze, "I appreciate the opportunity I've had here, but I think it's time for me to move on." The look on his face was priceless. "You're quitting?" he sputtered. "Yes, sir," I said, surprising myself with how steady my voice sounded. "I've started a business, and it's taking off. I need to give it my full attention." For the first time in my life, I saw something in his expression that wasn't disdain, respect, maybe even a little jealousy. "Well," he said after a moment, "good luck to you." Walking out of that office for the last time felt like shedding a weight I'd been carrying for years. I wasn't just some guy stuck in a dead-end job anymore. I was building something, creating a future I could be proud of. That night, I met Rachel for coffee to celebrate. "You actually quit?" she asked, her eyes wide. "Yep," I said, grinning. "No backup plan, no safety net. Just me and this business." Rachel smiled, but there was something deeper in her expression. A mix of admiration and something else I couldn't quite name. "You're braver than you think, Jason," she said softly. And for the first time, I started to believe it. Quitting my job felt like jumping out of an airplane without a parachute. At first, the thrill of freedom kept me soaring, but reality hit hard and fast. I had savings, sure, but not much. If I wanted this business to succeed, I'd have to hustle harder than I ever had before. The next few weeks were a blur of late nights and early mornings. I spent hours cold emailing potential clients, designing sample projects, and refining my pitch. Every yes felt like a small victory. Every no stung more than I cared to admit. Rachel became my unofficial cheerleader. "You've got this," she'd say every time I stopped by the bookstore for a much-needed coffee break. "Remember, you're doing something a lot of people are too scared to even try." Her encouragement kept me going, especially on the days when it felt like the world was against me. One of my biggest challenges was convincing people to trust me with their business. I wasn't some big-name agency or a tech wizard with years of experience. I was just a guy with a laptop and a lot of determination. My break came when I landed a gig with a local real estate office. They needed a complete overhaul of their outdated systems. Everything from digitizing client records to creating a user-friendly website. It was by far the biggest project I'd taken on, and the stakes were high. If I nailed this, it could open doors to even bigger opportunities. If I failed, well, I didn't let myself think about that. For 2 weeks straight, I lived and breathed that project. I worked through lunch, skipped dinners, and barely slept. By the time I delivered the final product, I was running on fumes but proud of what I'd built. The best part? They loved it. "This is incredible, Jason," the office manager said during our final meeting. "You've saved us so much time and frustration. We'll definitely be recommending you." Hearing that felt like validation for every hour I'd poured into this dream. The referrals started rolling in after that. A local law firm, a nonprofit, even a small chain of coffee shops that wanted to streamline their online ordering system. Each project brought new challenges, but with every success, I grew more confident in my abilities. Of course, not everything went smoothly. I botched a couple of deadlines early on, and one client canceled their contract after a misunderstanding about the scope of work. It stung, but Rachel reminded me that setbacks were part of the process. "Even the best entrepreneurs have off days," she said one evening as we shared takeout at the bookstore. "What matters is that you keep moving forward." And I did. By the end of the month, my calendar was booked solid, and my little business was starting to feel like a real success. But as proud as I was of the progress I'd made, there was still one thing I couldn't stop thinking about: Rachel. By now, Rachel had become more than just my cheerleader. She was the person I wanted to share every milestone with. Every success, every setback, every little victory. But the more time I spent with her, the harder it was to ignore the fact that I wanted something more than friendship. The thing was, Rachel wasn't just supportive. She believed in me in a way no one else ever had. She saw potential in me long before I started seeing it in myself. I wanted to tell her how I felt, but every time I thought about it, I chickened out. What if she didn't feel the same way? What if confessing my feelings ruined the best friendship I'd ever had? One Friday evening, after wrapping up a particularly stressful project, I stopped by the bookstore. Rachel was behind the counter, her face buried in a thick novel. When she saw me, she smiled like always. "Jason, how's my favorite tech wizard?" "Exhausted," I admitted, leaning against the counter. "But in a good way. I just finished this huge project for a law firm downtown." She set her book aside, her eyes lighting up. "That's amazing. You should celebrate. Let me guess. Frozen pizza and Netflix." "Hey, don't knock it," I said with a grin. "But actually, I was thinking, maybe we could grab dinner? Together." For a second, Rachel just stared at me, and my heart felt like it was doing backflips. Had I just made things weird? "Like a date?" she asked, tilting her head. "Yeah," I said, my voice cracking a little. "I mean, only if you want to." Her smile widened, and she let out a soft laugh. "Jason, I've been waiting for you to ask me that for months." Relief flooded through me. So intense I almost laughed out loud. "Really? Really?" she said, her cheeks turning slightly pink. "I just figured you weren't interested." We went to this little Italian place downtown, the kind of restaurant where the breadsticks are endless, and the lighting makes everyone look a little better than usual. Sitting across from Rachel, talking and laughing like we always did, I realized how easy it was to be around her. "You know," she said at one point, twirling her spaghetti, "I think I liked you even before you started your business. But seeing you go after your dream? That's when I knew you were special." My chest tightened, but this time it wasn't nerves. It was something deeper, something that felt a lot like love. After dinner, we walked along the riverfront, the city lights reflecting off the water. I couldn't stop smiling, and judging by the way Rachel kept sneaking glances at me, neither could she. "Thanks for dinner," she said when we stopped near a bench. "Thanks for saying yes," I replied, my heart pounding. I wanted to kiss her, but I hesitated. What if I misread the moment? But before I could overthink it, Rachel closed the gap between us and kissed me first. When she pulled back, she grinned. "About time." That night, as I lay in bed, I couldn't stop replaying the evening in my head. The business was thriving, and now Rachel was officially more than just my best friend. For the first time in a long time, it felt like everything in my life was finally coming together. Dating Rachel felt as natural as breathing. We slipped into the new rhythm of our relationship so seamlessly that it was hard to believe we hadn't been doing this all along. She quickly became my biggest source of support, and her encouragement pushed me to take even bigger steps with my business. But running a growing company wasn't exactly a walk in the park. My schedule was getting busier by the day, and I started to feel like there weren't enough hours to balance work and my relationship. Rachel noticed. "You're running yourself into the ground, Jason," she said one night after I'd canceled dinner plans for the third time that week. "You need to slow down." "I can't," I said, rubbing my temples. "If I slow down, I might lose momentum. The clients, the referrals, everything depends on me keeping up." Rachel frowned. "You're doing amazing, but you can't do it all by yourself. Have you thought about hiring someone?" The idea had crossed my mind, but it felt impossible. "I don't know if I'm ready for that. What if I can't afford it? What if they mess up and it hurts my reputation?" She reached across the table, taking my hand. "Jason, you've built something incredible. But if you keep burning yourself out, you won't be able to enjoy any of it. Think about it. Okay?" That conversation stuck with me. The truth was, Rachel was right. I was juggling so much that I barely had time to think, let alone enjoy the success I'd worked so hard for. The next day, I took a leap of faith and posted a job listing online. Nothing fancy, just a part-time assistant to help me manage scheduling and emails. Within a week, I had several applicants. One stood out, a recent college grad named Erin who had experience managing social media accounts for small businesses. She was enthusiastic, organized, and, most importantly, willing to work within my budget. During our first meeting, she immediately impressed me with her ideas for streamlining my workflow. "You've got great systems in place," she said, "but there's room to make things even more efficient." By the end of the meeting, I felt like I just won the lottery. Hiring Erin was one of the best decisions I could have made. With Erin on board, I finally had time to focus on the bigger picture. I started brainstorming new services to offer, reached out to more clients, and even had time to relax with Rachel. One evening, As we sat on her couch watching a movie, she turned to me and said, "You seem happier." I smiled, pulling her closer. "I am. Thanks to you." She rolled her eyes playfully. "Don't give me all the credit. You're the one who took the leap." For the first time, it felt like I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. Things were finally falling into place. My business was growing steadily, Rachel and I were happier than ever, and with Aaron handling the day-to-day tasks, I had more time to focus on the future. Felt like everything was moving in the right direction. But life has a way of throwing curveballs just when you least expect them. One Friday morning, as I was reviewing a proposal for a new client, my phone buzzed. It was Erin. "Jason, we have a problem," she said, her voice tight. "What's going on?" She hesitated. "The website for Oakwood Realty, it's down. Completely. And they're freaking out." My stomach dropped. Oakwood Realty was one of my biggest clients, and their website was a crucial part of their business. If it stayed offline for too long, it could mean major trouble for them and for me. "I'm on it," I said, already booting up my laptop. What I thought would be a quick fix turned into a nightmare. The website's hosting provider had experienced a data breach, and Oakwood Realty's site was one of many that had been taken offline. I spent the entire day on the phone with tech support, trying to recover the site. The longer it stayed down, the more frantic the calls from Oakwood's team became. By evening, I was exhausted and no closer to a solution. Rachel stopped by around dinner time, carrying takeout and a concerned look. "Hey," she said softly, setting the bag on my desk. "You've been at this all day. Any progress?" "Not much," I admitted, running a hand through my hair. "If I can't fix this soon, I could lose them as a client. And if they talk, it could ruin my reputation." Rachel placed a hand on my shoulder. "You'll figure it out, Jason. You always do. But you need to take a breath. You can't solve anything if you're running on empty." I sighed, knowing she was right. This is the first real crisis I've had. If I can't handle this, maybe I'm not cut out for this after all." She knelt down, looking me in the eyes. "Stop. You've built something amazing, and one setback doesn't change that. You're going to get through this. Okay?" Her words steadied me. I took a deep breath and got back to work. By midnight, I finally managed to restore the site. It wasn't perfect, but it was functional, and Oakwood Realty was back online. The next morning, I followed up with their team, offering free upgrades as an apology for the downtime. To my surprise, they were understanding. "We appreciate how quickly you handled this," their manager said. "These things happen, and it's clear you care about your clients. That means a lot." Hearing that was a relief. The crisis had shaken my confidence, but their reaction reminded me that even in business, it's how you handle the tough moments that counts. When I told Rachel the news later, she smiled. "See? I told you you'd figure it out." I laughed, pulling her into a hug. "Remind me to listen to you more often." "Don't worry," she said, grinning. "I will." The crisis wasn't easy, but it proved something to me. I was stronger than I thought. And with Rachel by my side, I felt like I could handle anything. Surviving the Oakwood Realty crisis gave me a newfound confidence. If I could handle that kind of pressure, I could handle anything. It also made me realize I needed to step up my game. With Aaron's help, I started brainstorming ways to grow the business. We looked at emerging trends in small business technology and identified areas where Brightside Design Company could offer more value. One idea stood out: expanding into digital marketing. I think it's a no-brainer, Aaron said during one of our planning sessions. You're already helping businesses with their websites. Adding marketing services would make you a one-stop shop. It was a huge leap, but it made sense. After all, websites were only part of the equation. Businesses needed strategies to attract customers and stand out online. That evening, I ran the idea by Rachel. We were sitting on her couch, her feet tucked under her as she sipped tea. "It sounds like a great opportunity," she said, "but it's also a big step. Are you ready for it?" "I think so," I said, though my stomach churned at the thought. "It's scary, but staying where I am feels scarier. If I want this to last, I need to keep evolving." She smiled. "That's what I love about you. You don't let fear stop you." Her words were exactly what I needed to hear. The next few months were a whirlwind. I hired a freelance graphic designer to handle social media content and brought on a part-time marketing strategist to develop campaigns for clients. It was a steep learning curve, but every new challenge felt like a chance to prove myself. One of our first marketing clients was a small craft brewery downtown. They wanted to boost their online presence and attract more customers to their weekly events. We worked on everything from targeted ad campaigns to redesigning their Instagram page. When they saw a 30% increase in foot traffic within the first month, they were thrilled, and so was I. "This is exactly what we needed," the owner told me during a meeting. "You're not just helping our business, you're helping us thrive." With each success, my reputation grew. Businesses that had once hesitated to work with me were now reaching out, eager to collaborate. I started getting invitations to networking events and speaking engagements, something I never imagined would happen. One evening, after a particularly productive day, I sat with Rachel at the riverfront, the same spot where we'd had our first date. "You've come a long way," she said, leaning her head on my shoulder. "I couldn't have done it without you," I replied, meaning every word. She looked up at me, her green eyes sparkling. "Jason Carter, I think you're unstoppable." For the first time, I believed her. Success felt amazing, but as my business expanded, so did the challenges. Balancing new clients, managing a growing team, and keeping up with industry trends became a daily juggling act. I started to understand why people said scaling a business was the hardest part. One particularly chaotic week, I landed a contract with a regional fitness chain, a huge win for Brightside Design Company. It was our biggest client yet, and their demands were intense. They wanted a complete overhaul of their website, a mobile app, and a full-scale digital ad campaign, all on a tight deadline. "It's doable," Aaron said during our initial meeting, though her tone made it clear it would be close. "Barely," I replied, already feeling the weight of the project. To make matters worse, the brewery client from earlier needed urgent updates to their ad campaign, and one of my smaller clients was unhappy with delays on their project. By the end of the week, I was drowning in tasks, barely eating or sleeping. Rachel noticed immediately. "You look exhausted," she said one evening as we sat in her apartment. "When's the last time you took a break?" I rubbed my eyes, slumping against the couch. "I can't afford to slow down, Rachel. There's too much to do." She frowned. "Jason, you're burning out. You've worked so hard to build this. But what's the point if you can't enjoy it?" "I'll rest after this project," I said, more to reassure her than anything else. But Rachel wasn't having it. "No, you won't. You've been saying that for months. You need help. Real help. Aaron's great, But you're taking on too much yourself. I sighed, knowing she was right. Again. The next morning, I took her advice and reached out to Marcus, the workshop leader who'd helped me get started. "Jason, it's great to hear from you," he said when I called. "What's going on?" "I think I need a mentor," I admitted, feeling a little embarrassed. "Things are growing faster than I can handle, and I don't know how to manage it all." "First of all, congrats," Marcus said. "Fast growth is a good problem to have. Second, you're smart to ask for help. Let's meet next week and talk strategy." That meeting with Marcus was a turning point. He helped me identify areas where I could delegate more responsibility and encouraged me to hire another full-time team member. He also reminded me to focus on my strengths, creative problem-solving and client relationships, while letting my team handle the operational details. "Trust your people," he said. "That's how you scale without losing your sanity." Over the next few weeks, I took small but meaningful steps to lighten my load. I hired a project manager to oversee deadlines and communication, freeing me up to focus on the bigger picture. It wasn't easy letting go of control, but once I did, I felt like I could finally breathe again. Rachel was thrilled when I told her. "I'm proud of you," she said, leaning across the table to kiss me. "Now, let's celebrate with a real date night." "Deal," I said with a laugh, already feeling lighter. Just when it seemed like everything was back on track, life threw me another curveball. It started with an email from the fitness chain client, the one I'd been working overtime to impress. The subject line read, "Urgent. Proposal concerns." My stomach sank as I opened it. "Jason," the email began, "while we appreciate your team's hard work, we've decided to pause the project. After reviewing other options, we feel it's best to move forward with a larger agency." Larger agency. I reread the words, hoping I'd misunderstood. But no. After weeks of work and countless hours spent planning their project, they dropped us. I felt like the wind had been knocked out of me. This wasn't just a lost client. It was a huge opportunity slipping through my fingers. Erin found me staring at the email in my office later that morning. "You okay?" she asked. "They dropped us?" I said flatly, sliding my laptop toward her so she could see the email. She winced. "That's rough. But, hey, it's not the end of the world. You've got plenty of other clients." "I know," I said, though it didn't feel that way. "But this was our biggest client. If word gets out that we couldn't handle it—" "Stop," she interrupted firmly. "They didn't say you couldn't handle it. They said they wanted to work with a larger agency. That's not a reflection on you. It's just business." I wanted to believe her, but the doubt was hard to shake. That evening, Rachel and I met for coffee, and I told her everything. "I don't get it," I said, staring into my untouched cup. "I gave them everything they asked for. What else could I have done?" Rachel reached across the table and took my hand. "Jason, you've got to stop beating yourself up. Losing one client doesn't erase all the amazing work you've done. You're still building something incredible." "I guess," I muttered. "Listen," she said, leaning forward. "Setbacks are part of the process. You've been through worse and you've come out stronger every time. This isn't any different." Her words were comforting, but I still went home feeling defeated. The next day, I woke up with a new sense of determination. Losing the fitness chain hurt, but Rachel and Aaron were right. I couldn't let it define me. I spent the morning reviewing client feedback and identifying areas where we could improve.